And I am happy to introduce Chris Walters, who's with us this morning. Chris is the grants manager for the Arts Council of the Southern Finger Lakes, and he has a PowerPoint presentation he's going to share with us and talk a bit about the opportunities that the Arts Council has. So I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
All right, thank you so much. So I'm going to share my screen and share my presentation. And so, yeah, so I'm going to talk about some grant opportunities that I know a number of you on this have applied for in the past, some maybe not, but I can talk about the different arts and cultural grants we administer on behalf of the Arts Council and for the New York State Council on the Arts. So for those not familiar with the Arts Council, so we are located in Corning, but we work in a number of different counties. We work in Cattaraugus, Chemung, Steuben, Schuyler, and Tioga counties. And it's kind of our big service area. We do grants in all those counties. In Corning, we also have a gallery, do a lot of programs, advocacy work, other things for artists and organizations. We have a pretty vibrant folk art program and we've been administering these particular grants for over 40 years from the state. So I've been doing this programs for about 10 years or so. So along with the grants, I run our gallery. I'm also a photographer. So part of my job is really it's working directly with applicants. So it's whether it's these grant programs, finding other grant opportunities, but it's really just working directly with people, helping with applications, giving a lot of constructive feedback, try to give a lot of detailed feedback, honest feedback, but also trying to keep things as simple as possible. I know grant writing is another skill set. It's asking people to speak sometimes in a different language. It can be complicated. So really try to make our applications and our processes as simple as we can, because I know there's a lot of other stuff going on. So the grants I'm going to talk about, they come from the New York State Council on the Arts. So they're funded through their statewide community re-grant program. And the three grants that we offer are community arts, individual artist, and teacher artist. I'm not going to talk about the individual artist one. I can briefly mention it just because it's not as applicable to what libraries are doing. But the key thing to kind of remember about the grants I'm going to talk about is that there's the five counties I mentioned. These are for 2024. So these are any projects that you want to do in 2024. And then this is kind of doesn't really matter for this group, but it needs to take place in the county where you're located. So if you're going to do, a program in your library, it needs to take place in that county. I know it's kind of silly to say, but it's part of the regulations. And then you're allowed to request up to $5,000 total. So you could apply for two different grants, up to three grants, one big grant for 5,000. It's up to you. And there's no matching requirement for any of these grant programs. So right now we're going through all the kind of sessions, things like that, a lot of support. The deadline is the 15th of December. The review panels take place mid-January, late January, and then we will send out award notifications. Probably won't be until the first week of February. And then we send the checks in the mail as soon as we get the money from the state. Sometimes it's on time, sometimes it's not. Last year was a little late. I don't think money got out until maybe April. Year before that, it was earlier. So it kind of just varies with the way their contracts work. We had to apply again this year. So I'm not sure how their contracting is working this year, what the state's doing. So hopefully it won't be too much to delay. And then we announce them have a ceremony in the spring. So the big grant that I would say libraries have participated in is the community arts grant. And that's the bulk of the money that we give out every year is for community arts grants. These are for any kind of public facing arts cultural activities. So we're talking about workshops, performances, public art, anything that you're doing for the benefit of the community and that's going to be accessible to the public. A lot of times libraries, they might fund their whole year of workshop series. Maybe they just want to do one large workshop on something. Had libraries in the past that have done mural projects. We've had libraries that have put on concert series. A lot of libraries will tie it to summer reading programs, things like that. In particular with the summer reading programs, it's really important that just remember whatever you're applying for, the main purpose has to be for the arts and cultural aspect of it. It's great if it gets, new library members into your library or it gets new readers or it's tied into what you're doing. But the initial focus really has got to be on that arts and cultural aspect. So these grants range from $500 to $5,000. They can fund pretty much anything directly related to the cost of doing the project. So whether that's paying the artist fees, marketing, supplies, your expenses, running it out of the library, anything directly related to it can pay up to $5,000. And like I said, there's no matching requirement for this grant. And matching just means like if you're requesting 5,000, then you have to come up with an additional 5,000. So you don't have to do that with this. If your project costs $5,000, you need $5,000, you can ask for $5,000. And then, like I said, it has to be accessible to the public. So it can't be for a small closed group. I'll talk about the grant that would apply for, but this just has to be for the public. Doesn't mean you can't limit it to certain numbers of people based on, whatever size of space you have, or some classes might just be for a certain number of people. That's fine. Just has to be initially made available to the public. So all these grants we do, they have different criteria and priorities. And this is what the grant panelists will look at in terms of giving scoring. So the criteria, the artistic, cultural, programmatic merit, the benefit to the community that you're serving, the accessibility of the community, the managerial fiscal competence, and then priorities, ones that pay artist fees. And then applicants and or projects that BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and or folk art, folklore, traditional art applicants or projects. So those get a couple of extra priority points for this grant program. In terms of being an applicant, you just have to have nonprofit status. So I think all the libraries in SDLS have their own nonprofit status. I know there's a few. I know like CCLD is an exception because they share a nonprofit status that covers 4 different libraries. But I believe everyone has their own nonprofit status. If they don't, there are mechanisms where you can apply through another community partner, fiscal sponsor, or maybe have a friends group that is a nonprofit status. But if that's the case where you don't have your own nonprofit status, you can just reach out to me and I can talk to you about what other different options there might be available. So then the other grant program that is applicable to the libraries, I think, is going to be the Teaching Artist Grant Program. So this is going to be, it's somewhat similar to the Community Arts Grant, but it's for sequential arts education projects. And it's up to 5,000 again, can fund the same things. It's really like enhancing, not kind of taking the place of curriculum. This grant can be in schools or it can be in community centers. So that's where the libraries come in. So it can be something where it takes place in a school day at a school, or it can take place at a community center. We do not define what a community center is because every community has something that they call a community center. Libraries are community centers, a youth center, all kinds of different places could be community centers. But this grant is in case you want to work with a specific group of students. So it has to be K through 12 age youth, and it doesn't have to be open to the public. So a good example, there's a library I think that did like a choreography, costume design programming. So they worked with their teens on this whole series of kind of start to finish how to do costuming and to intertwine with the choreography of a show. So that was a whole project they did. So they wanted to work with a very specific group of students. So this grant would be the one if you wanted to really focus in on kind of one kind of discipline and really wanted to work with one group of students on something. So if you're going to be the applicant for this as the library, then it would just need to take place in the same library. The criteria and priorities are roughly the same, just kind of the benefit for the students themselves that are participating, not necessarily the greater community benefit. So like I said, the library can be the applicant. The teaching artist can also be an applicant. So say you wanted to do a community arts grant for some other giant workshop series you want to do, but then you also might have this group of students you want to do where you could work with a teaching artist that could apply to kind of maximize how you could maximize some of the money you could get. And again, I can talk to you if you have different things like that might come up. The big thing with this grant, besides that it can be for a group of closed students, is there does have to be this a 3-session minimum. So there has to be at least 3 sequential learning sessions with the same teaching artist in the same group of students. And that group of students could be as little as 5 students. It could be 20 students. It really varies. But it's really, again, it's if you have like a specific population of youth that are really looking forward to like one kind of discipline or something is the reason that you would want to apply for this particular grant. And I think if I didn't say it, with the community arts grant and this one, all the the guidelines. And so if you haven't looked at our grant programs, go to the webpage and it will talk about all the specifics about other eligibility issues. So the deadline for these grants is December 15th at 11:59 p.m. for all applications. It's an online system, so it really will shut off at 11:59 p.m. So don't test your internet capabilities or anything like that. I would definitely submit beforehand. We do use a Submittable. I know a number of people are familiar with that platform. It's a pretty good online application system as far as things go. Feels like it's a pretty easy, simple to fill out, upload documents. You can save and return to it anytime. You can use your same user information if you're already have a user account with them. Sometimes libraries might want to have, stick to the same account because you want to have historical access to applications, things like that through Submittable. So the way our application is broken down is that there are kind of three different sections. There's the applicant section, project section, and a budget section. Applicant section, and I'll show an application example in it after I finish with this slideshow. Just kind of, who you are as the applicant, name, contact information, stuff like that. Then there's the project narratives. We're going to talk about the actual application, and then budget information. There's a section where you can put in a letter of partnerships if that's going to happen with a grant. So that's if it's applicable. And then artistic work samples are required. We don't require marketing materials. We don't require any kind of nonprofit documents like your budget, your list of board of directors, things like that. You do have to provide your EIN in a part of the application, but we don't require any other documents like that. And then we also do not require a budget form. We got rid of the budget form 2 years ago, I think. I love that we got rid of the budget form. I hate budget forms. They're very complicated. They sometimes don't play nice with whatever software you have. They're just always the bane of everybody's existence. So we do not have a budget form anymore. There still is a narrative that you have to include information about what you're going to spend the grant money on, but there's not an actual separate form that you have to upload. So the bulk of the application, though, is going to be these narrative questions. And there's about 5 or 6 short narrative questions. And each one is really, it's tied to those grant criteria and priority. I know one of my kind of pet peeves is when you get asked a lot of questions that aren't relevant to whatever the criteria are, or there's a bunch of criteria listed and there's no way to evaluate that within the application. So our application is not perfect, but I do try to make sure that it really is a match to what those criteria and priority are. Roughly the word count in the end is probably going to be about 1.5 pages, 2 pages of writing, if you put it all into some kind of document. But really the narrative is where you're going to provide those details that the grant panelists need to make their decision. So that's really the bulk of the information they're going to be accessing to find out about what your project is all about or what your library is all about. A couple of things to keep in mind when you're working on your narratives, and I think this is applicable to any writing you do, any other grant things you look after. First off, just really take your time, look through the questions. We give prompts for each question, so we really try to be specific about what information we want. So really take your time to look at it and just answer that question that's asked. Don't answer what you think they want to know or what you think the question's about. So really try to pay attention to that. Then when you're writing stuff, you be very specific in your application. So for instance, if you're going to do a series of workshops, we're going to do 3 workshops. We're going to hire this teacher for this workshop, this teacher for that workshop. They're going to be for 20 participants each. They're going to be free of charge. They're going to be in the fall. They're going to be in the afternoon. They're going to be, so any of those kind of specific details you can put in is important. Now, I say that with a big caveat that we're talking about 2024. That it's sometimes hard to put all this in when you don't know some of these specifics. So you do have to do your best faith guess of okay, well, I know we want to have this artist. So we've talked to this artist. We've said, hey, we're going to apply for a grant. Can we write you into this grant? And they're like, great, keep me posted. So it is a lot of, writing in and planning, and then you'll get the funding. And I mean, there's very rarely an application that is fulfilled exactly as is written, because life comes up, artists move, or you book a musician and they book something else. I mean, it happens. But try to be as specific as you can when you're putting together your application. Try to be concise. Be kind of ruthless when you're going through and avoid any kind of redundancies or repetitive things that you might put in there. Definitely use consistent language. I think one thing that does trip up grant panelists a lot is when there's a mix of terms that people might use. So like you might use workshop in one paragraph, later on you use classes, or you might talk about sessions versus workshops or something like that. Stick to one term. You really want an application to be read very quickly, very easily by a grant panelist. And then you want it to all kind of tell the same story. So like in the budget information, if you're saying, I'm going to have 4 workshops at $250, but then earlier you're only talking about 3 workshops. What about, where's this 4th one from? So it's those kind of small details that can hang up on grant panelists and that can prove a little problematic and kind of lower scores. So really kind of make sure and proofread. And a lot of times it's just innocent mistakes, like you forgot that you put the wrong number in, or originally you were starting out with 5 and you went to 4, or something happens. And then avoid your thesaurus. There's no need to go to use a lot of fancy grant speak language, and it's try to be as communicable and simple language as possible, because your hope is that the grant panelists will look at your application, read it through, get it right away, say, okay, yes, this meets the criteria, this is what these grants are for. You don't want the application where they're kind of trying to figure out what is this all about, jumping different parts, figuring out what some of the language is. If you're going to write stuff in your application, kind of make sure you back it up. So like if you're going to say that our community has always wanted these programs, or our community, these are really important for a community. Well, how do you know that? Is it because you always have wait lists for your programs? Is it because in a 30-mile radius there is no free arts programming? Is it because this kind of music is something that used to be in our community but it's not anymore? So just think about some of the stuff that you're putting in the application and putting some context to that. Use a lot of active words, confidence words when you're writing. Definitely write as if the grant panelists don't know you. We do a really nice job, I think, and I'll talk a little bit about where the grant panelists come from. But there's a chance the grant panelists might not know your library. They might not know what's happening in your community, what role you play, what it could mean to bring this particular arts programming to your community. So make sure that context is in your application. It's really important that whatever you want them to know is in the application. There's a chance they could know you. There's a chance they could be a patron of your library. There's a chance they might Google your library and see what they can find out about it, but they might not. So it's really what's in that application is the most important. The nice thing about these grants is it's really about the quality of what you're going to do. It's not about the quantity. So for instance, if you have a program that is geared towards 10 people, but then over here you've got some kind of grant program that's going to reach 3,000 people in a concert, both of those are going to be weighted exactly the same. So just because one's going to reach more people, it doesn't matter. It's really about the quality of the program itself. Now, I do have to ask for participant numbers and things like that in the application. That's because we have to put that in our reporting to the state, but that's something the grant panelists can't look at in terms of making decisions. And then the big thing too is get some kind of honest and outside opinion on what you're writing. So part of my job is that I can look at your narratives. I can't look at your application drafts within Submittable, but what I have people do is just write, just copy the sentence or the question, copy their narratives into some kind of document and email it to me, and then I can provide comments on it. And I look for things that the grant panelists are going to be looking at. Whether you're answering the questions, providing details, things like that. But whoever you get as someone else, get someone to look at it. Get someone that's going to give you an honest opinion. Don't get someone that's going to just say, "Oh, you're amazing. I'm so proud of what you're doing for our community." That's wonderful. It's got nice, good adulation like that. However, for a grant application, you really want to get someone that's actually going to look at it with a somewhat critical eye. And make sure you've really answered all the questions and really met all those grant criteria. And let's see. So the one part of our application where you do upload different documents is the work samples. So these are they're about supporting your application. It's not, you don't want to hurt your application, and it's where you're going to demonstrate their artistic capabilities of whether it's the artist that you're hiring or project that you're going to do. So it's really about demonstrating the ability of the artist to do this particular project that you're working on. And you should make it specific to the project. I know a lot of artists or even libraries too. Like you might have so many different mediums that people work in, but it's important that the work samples speak specifically to what you're applying for. I know sometimes people like to include everything on a resume, or they like to provide samples of all the things they do. It's great, but you got to make it relevant to this particular project you're applying for. You can also provide links to videos or audios. And if you do that, I recommend using links, and I'll show you how to do that, as opposed to uploading files. You're welcome to upload a video or audio file, but I know sometimes those just can take a lot of space. Sometimes they're a little problematic playing, depending on what kind of device people have. So if something is streaming somewhere, that's usually the easiest way to go about. So when you put in work samples, so you could put an image of your library. Like if you're going to talk about, we're going to do a series of workshops in a particular space, or concert venue, or if we're going to do a public mural, put examples of where that's going to be. If you're talking about working with a particular population, put an image of examples where you've worked with particular populations. Or if you're bringing in a specific kind of cultural art form, have images of that. So anything that's really going to give you context and demonstrate the artistic abilities of somebody. Like if someone is doing a particular kind of art form, you can have pictures of what they're doing in terms of a workshop, and then also you can provide some samples of their kind of work that they've done. Same thing if you're doing a concert, show what the venue space might look like, show the kind of performers you might have. This is a mural example. So someone was doing, like, say, storybook mural. They did a whole giant mural in Storybook. You don't want to have some other kind of mural that doesn't necessarily speak to that particular kind of topic or that particular kind of art form. So just be kind of specific about the way that work samples are included. And then if you are going to include media links, the easiest thing to do is just copy the links to a Word document and then save it as a PDF. And just a couple of things with the links: make sure that it's a link that's going to stay live. It's not going to change. If you have some kind of password with it, make sure it does have the password with it that you type in. Give a little brief description, something like that. And the way that this whole process works in terms of, okay, put in your application, how are we going to actually get funded? So these are evaluated and scored by grant panelists, and the grant panelists are comprised of artists and community members. And we really have people from every single county. We try to have a good representation of the kind of applications that come in, whether it's particular art forms or the locations and communities. I'll usually have a librarian or two on the panels because we usually get a lot of applications from libraries. So it's really a huge important part of this process, that it's not just bringing arts and cultural access to people, but it's the community members making those decisions. So you're the community that's submitting the applications and saying this is what our community wants, but it's community members that are the ones that are going to make those funding decisions. So they will get the applications, they'll look them over. You're right, we've been doing them through Zoom, but we'll have the grant panel, and then we'll discuss the applications, and then afterwards they'll score them. And so there's 0 to 5 points for each criterion, and then 0 to 4 for each priority. And so my process during that is that I facilitate the panel sessions. I can offer historical information about, okay, yes, this person was an applicant. Yes, they fulfilled the requirements, things like that. But I don't offer any opinions. I don't say that, oh, yes, this library is wonderful, or, oh, no, this library never has the book my kids want. I'm never going, we don't fund. Like, so any of those things, like, I do not share any of those opinions. Or whether someone has had, come to me 20 times asking questions, or maybe they've never come to me with questions. So it's really about those community members that are on the panel, that they're the ones making the decisions. So the areas where I might interject is maybe there's an eligibility question, or there's something with the guidelines, or something like that. NYSCA does allow for me to say, hey, what do you think? Do you think this is eligible? Is this the appropriate grant? But usually it's panelists would need clarification on certain things is when I would be involved. But other than that, I usually just take notes and I facilitate the process. So after the panelists provide me the scores, then we apply a formula to however much money we get from the state, but the scores, and then that kind of is determined how much funding each applicant's going to get. And then afterwards, all these decisions are presented to our board of directors. they cannot change any panel decisions. They cannot go through and say, oh no, this library needs a higher score, anything like that. It's a purely a review system. It's a checks and balances that we go through for the process. And that is the way the review process works. In terms of assistance on our website, we have a number of, how to write up effective applications, how to use the online application, got a video for how to use the online application. I think it's from last year. I can't remember if I updated it this year or not, but it still might look slightly different, but it's going to be applicable to using the system. The grant guidelines, which I highly recommend you should look at the grant guidelines that are really going to detail all those eligibility things. And then if you would like me to look at your narrative, like I said, it's easy to send it as a Word document or some kind of document you can email to me, and at least a week before the deadline, just to ensure that I have enough time to take a look at it. And then, so right now our offices are under renovation. I've been told our phones are back working yet. I haven't checked, but email is the best way to get in touch with me. And then after, if you initiate email and you want to talk to me, that's fine. We can set up a phone call. But email is really the best way right now to get a hold of me. So I'm going to stop sharing this real quick, and then I'm going to share a glimpse of the online application, if I can find it. Okay, so this is the application for the Community Arts grant. So when you go to earts.submittable.com, you will see like a list of applications. So the ones that the libraries, you would probably go for the Community Arts grant. Do make sure though, there's a Community Arts sponsored applicant grant. That's the one if you don't have nonprofit status. So it's really this main one. If you don't have a submittable account, you'll need to just create one. There'll be a very brief message, link back to the grant page, things like that. And then you're going to see the whole application at once. So you don't have to complete one part to see the next or anything like that. It's very basic. Type in your information, applicant name, applicant description. So tell us about your library. Tell us about what your role you have in your community, and try to think broadly. Don't just think of, oh, we're a library, leave it at that. Try to think about what your role is in your community. So again, basic information about the applicant itself. So then we get down to the project section. Project title, that can change, but we need something for the purpose of the application. First narrative is the biggest one. So this is where you're really going to talk about the bulk of your project. The merit, the artistic cultural merit. So this is where you're going to talk about the who, the what, the when, who are your participating artists, and then relevant information that's going to demonstrate their ability to complete the project. Then you got your work samples, again, kind of list of files. If you need more than 5 files, I just recommend just combining something into a PDF. Community benefit and accessibility. So, describe your community, why this is going to benefit them, how you're going to make it accessible to them, and really, really think specifically, talk about the community that visits your library and that this project is going to bring to them. And is it because they don't have access because classes are expensive if they want to go to an art center? Is it because of economic reasons? Is it because of logistical reasons? It's an aging population that can't drive somewhere. I mean, just think through really what the benefit is to this particular population and who they are. And then describe your ability to complete the grant funding the project. So you can talk about other grant projects you've done, other workshop series, things like that. And then if you're meeting the grant criteria priorities, you can include them here. Then when we get to the budget section, there's going to be 3 things to fill out. So the total project cost, and that's going to include your grant amount that you're requesting, the actual grant request, and the description. So let's say that you're going to request $4,000, or let's say you request $5,000, but your total project's going to be $7,000. So you're going to put $7,000 the total project cost, $5,000 in the grant request. And in this big narrative, this is where you're going to write out what that grant request is. So you're going to list the specific expense items and the dollar amounts. Some people like to put a narrative in here. Some people like to put a table in here. It honestly doesn't matter as long as it's clear, and really make sure most people will copy and paste into the narratives, and just make sure that the formatting stays the way you want it to. Because I honestly can't remember what Submittable does when you copy and paste. So just make sure it's clear with whatever you're putting in there. But you're going to list, say you're going to do 6 workshops with the same artist, they're going to cover a whole different series. So you're going to put six workshops at, $500 per workshop for the artist or something. So anything applicable to that. Some artists are going to have their time and their supplies and everything and as an all-inclusive fee for a class. Sometimes they might not. So sometimes you might have to list the artist fee, you might have to list the supplies separately. But anything that you want that grant to cover, you need to put those specific amounts in here. So it's got to match up to this grant request amount. But then you should also just put in there, if the grant's not enough money, so then how are you going to come up with the rest of the money? You don't have to detail those extra expenses, but you should put in, through library funds, through fundraisers, some other way you're doing it. And then these are those numbers that I was talking about at the end. So the number of artists participating, number of youth, and number of individuals. So the number of individuals would be inclusive of the youth number as well. So we just have to report those to the state, and it's easier to just collect them in the application than afterwards. And then,
sorry, we did have one question.
yeah.
If scrolling back up where you have applicant name, would that be the library's name or the individual who is filling out the application?
So that would be the library's name, and then further along in this applicant contact person, so that would be where they would put their name, and it doesn't have to be the library director. It's going to be whoever's responsible for managing the project.
Great, thanks.
And same thing with the email address and phone number. Like those are going to be the main ways that I contact people. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Then yeah. And then so say you're done with your application, then you have terms and conditions at the bottom. And then you would just check that off, and then you would submit. So Submittable, the last couple of years they had an autosave button. I don't know if it's still autosaving. I don't know if it's still auto-saving. They got rid of the little message that says it's auto-saving. I'm not really sure, but they still have save draft button. So I would just recommend hitting that save draft button as frequent as you want. And then once you are ready to submit, hit that submit button. Make sure that you get a confirmation email from Submittable that your application has been successfully submitted. Usually I would get one as well. It's been touch or hit or miss whether I'm getting the confirmations or not, but I can log in to Submittable and I can see your applications. For some reason, you don't get your confirmation from Submittable, contact me, tell me you submitted. I would go into the system and then I can look. If I don't see it for some reason, then we'll try to troubleshoot. Maybe it's stuck in your draft somewhere. Something happened. Unfortunately, every year we will have something happen where someone thought they submitted and they didn't. And there's only been one time where it really was like Submittable had this huge problem. It wasn't on our deadline day. It was like kind of in the middle of things, and they basically like everyone lost save drafts. They were changing their servers or something, and it was really horrible. But that's the really only time that we've ever had any issue with Submittable itself. Most of the time, it's maybe you thought you hit submit, but you really just hit the save draft button. Maybe your internet connection went out. Who knows what it is, but really make sure you get that confirmation. If for some reason you are 100% sure that you submitted, even though I'm not seeing anything and we've done all the troubleshooting, then I would just contact Submittable and I would ask them to look into what's going on. But do make sure you get that confirmation. So that's the application. The Teaching Artist Grant is very, very similarly structured. It's the questions are slightly different, but the structure itself is the same. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And then just real quickly, the final grant, I know I didn't present about it, but it's an individual artist grant. And so that's for someone that wants to create new work. So if you know of artists in the area that, they need some money, they have a new project they want to create, that's the grant to apply for. So they could reach out. That's for up to $2,500. And it's just to create new work. They have to have some kind of public engagement, either in the creation of the work or the way that once it's created and presented to the public. But it's a nice grant program. So if you know artists that are looking for funding for their own personal projects, that's the one that they can look into. And that is kind of what I have to say about that. So questions? Have I overwhelmed? Am I?
Yeah, feel free to unmute and ask a question or type in the chat if you have anything you'd like to ask. Chris, I just was wondering, do you have, sometimes it's tough for us to find artists or musicians to work with. Do you keep any like lists or ideas
Yeah,
of folks?
it's always tricky. So I mean, we list a number of artists on our website that are members of the organization.
Okay.
Um, it is tricky though, because some artists might have don't con you have to request permission to contact, things like that. So we don't have like a giant list of for that purpose. However, if you are interested in um trying to find a particular artist in particular medium, then definitely reach out. And yes, we're able to suggest ones. So yeah, so we can, there's like a not a formal like list, but we can
Okay.
help find people, and then also using the resources of other libraries too. I mean, I think number of libraries on this Zoom and then elsewhere hire a lot of different teaching artists and things like that. And I know BOCES has kept a list before um, of approved artists that can go into the schools. I don't know how up to date it is or not, but that's another place that people could look to.
Great. Thanks.
I have a question. The artists, do they have to be from the southern tier, from the counties listed?
No, they don't. No. The main thing is that like as the applicant, you have to be from the county, but the artist can be from anywhere. So it's really about what kind of, you know, project you're looking to do. And sometimes it makes sense that you're gonna want to go with the local artist. Maybe sometimes it's someone that isn't you don't have that particular art form in your area, or it's something that very specialized or something like that. So yeah, so no, they don't have to be from the county.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and on kind of on that note too, a lot of libraries in the past have, say there's a library that's geographically close to yours, and a lot of times maybe libraries will they'll either put together kind of a big application as a joint application, or maybe they'll put separate ones, but they can sometimes artists will have reduced fees if like they know they're going to go to the same library, because they don't their artist fee stays the same, but maybe they don't have to account for like travel costs and things like that. So if you are looking to do like a certain program, it doesn't hurt to reach out to other libraries to see if they're thinking of doing some similar stuff. Because like one, they might do a program in the morning at your library, doing something in the afternoon at another library, for instance.
Great. Anybody else have any questions at the moment?
Yeah, please reach out if you have questions and about this, or my job is grants in general and gallery, but I mean, if you have other questions about funding sources or anything you're doing in your libraries, I'm always more than happy to help out, whether it's specifically to these grants or not. We do have another smaller grant program called the Quick Arts Grant Program. We don't have any more funding for this year, but those usually launch in February. And those unfortunately are only for Steuben, Chemung, and Schuyler County, but they're $500 grants, and it's basically a smaller version of that community arts grant program, and that's on a rolling basis until we run out of funds. So that's you come up with an idea, you have a project you want to do, and it's a pretty short, simple application for that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then finally, just if you've never applied to grants or you never applied to these grant programs, I really highly recommend it. I mean, a lot of our funding does support libraries, particularly the community arts grant. I'm not saying it's a sure thing, but people are very receptive to what libraries are doing in communities and to the kind of programming that people can do. So if you have a good idea and you can get an application together, I definitely recommend you applying. We don't know the dollar amount yet for what we're going to get from the state. I hope it's a little more than last year. And last year we actually were able to do 2 rounds because we had so much more funding. So I'm not sure what the total amount is, but last year we gave out $270,000 between the 3 grant programs. I think we gave it about 90 different grants for these things, and community arts is the bulk of that money. I would say it's probably about 80% of the money goes towards the community arts grants. So there's definitely a lot of good money out there for this kind of stuff. So
Excellent. And Chris, could you just tell me your email address again? I'm going to drop it in the chat.
yeah, Chris at earts.org. Chris
Awesome.
at earts.org.
eArts. Okay.
Yep, that's right.
All right. If there's no other questions, we'll let Chris go, and you have his contact information if you have any questions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
thank you.
please, you can reach out, and if you'd like me to stop by for a visit, I know I try to visit people when I can, and happy to do so. So thanks
Great.
again.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.